Hey everyone. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the Asian cultures, music within Asian cultures today. We'll go over the PowerPoint. There are lots of really cool videos that I have embedded in the PowerPoint. If for some reason they don't work, they should. I mean, I can try to, you can let me know. I can try to send the links directly to you, or you could just go to YouTube and type in specific keywords, traditional Chinese, Japanese, or Indonesian music, gamelan orchestra, and these same videos that I have in the website, in not the website, in the PowerPoint will probably come up. So if they don't work, that's one way to do it. But hopefully they do, because some of these videos are not only performance videos of the instruments and different types of traditional music, but some of them do give you kind of in-depth information about either the different instruments or the specific type of music that we're talking about in the PowerPoint. There's no reading that goes along with this. It's all on the PowerPoint. No, extra chapter or anything like that. So you don't really have a lot of extra things to do with the reflection paper. Just think of it as kind of like an in-class essay. You're going to take what's in the PowerPoint about these three different cultures and kind of discuss similarities and differences. It only has to be like 1 to 2 pages. Not really worry too much about citing sources and all that. If you do use an outside source, at least include that in like a bibliography at the end, but you don't necessarily have to. This is just kind of an exercise for you guys, and also to let me know that you kind of are understanding and following along and can at least recognize that these cultures have a lot of similarities, and especially when talking about the Indonesian culture and traditions, that there are some definite differences there as well. Um, you should be able to find a good bit of information about this stuff anywhere on the internet. Just please, like you can use Wikipedia to give you like general information, but it's not a source that you necessarily want to cite. Uh, think of something else like Encyclopedia Britannica, or another website that might be sponsored by another college or university or something like that, or uh, some from like an institute or a historical society that studies, this type of stuff. Try to find those types of sources to cite, not Wikipedia. Like I said, Wikipedia is great for general knowledge, but it's not necessarily academically great. So just keep that in mind. Um, all right, so I'm going to share the screen, and here is the PowerPoint. Let me go ahead and start it. So there are plenty of different cultures that we could talk about, but we're focusing on China and Japan mainly because, those two, like, they're the biggest cultures. They have some of the oldest traditions, and they share a lot of traditions and a lot of similar instruments. So that's why we're taking a look at them. And then Indonesia, Indonesia is like, it's kind of an outlier. It's a little bit different, but it does have a rich tradition, especially with the gamelan orchestra that you'll see. And the gamelan is something that has been immensely studied, and especially here in the West, like in Europe and in America and Canada, people have taken like a very strong interest in the gamelan orchestra, especially like not only in studying it but also in performance. And there are lots of gamelan orchestras actually within the United States and Canada. typically associated with like a university or whatnot, but there are a lot of them here in the States that give a lot of performances. And, you can kind of see that from if you go to YouTube and you search gamelan orchestra, you can find both kind of traditional from Java and Bali, but also a lot of performances from here in the States from like student ensembles and such. So here's the map. There's China, if you didn't already know. So this page, it talks a lot about the history and kind of origins. The history, and not only history, but the music as well, like goes back a long time in China, traced back to 5,000 years. Some of the oldest instruments in the world can be found and traced in China. Even though you have some of the oldest instruments, the musical culture of China is well developed. It's just a little bit different from ours. They have some different kinds of flutes. Instead of what we call a transverse flute, so a flute that is horizontal, their flutes in China and Japan and other Eastern cultures are typically made from wood, and they are end blown. That means they are vertical, not horizontal. Um, Still played kind of the same way. Like recorders are very similar, but a recorder has a mouthpiece that you actually put inside of your mouth and blow into. The Chinese, Japanese, and other flutes that are vertical, they have an opening kind of like a normal flute that you would play in band. It's just shaped a little bit differently, and it's at the end, like or top of the flute. You rest your mouth on the top and you blow kind of in and across these flutes the same way that you would a normal, like I said, a normal flute and band. It just sounds a little bit different because of the material, because of the change in shape of the opening. It's a little bit narrower than say a flute opening. So it does have a different sound. They're also tuned a little bit differently. The holes are spaced out for their specific tuning, not like our Western music tuning. So a lot of these instruments are going to seem very unique, but you're going to have a lot of similarities between China and Japan, and you're going to see some similarities like with the flute and different string instruments that kind of cross over into our Western culture. One thing that's a little bit different, like I mentioned, is the tuning system. So our system is based on like a relationship between whole steps and half steps, and everything is kind of based on major and minor scales, this set of 8 notes that sound a particular way. So with Eastern music, they tend to use either microtonal, where and this can be found in some places in China and Japan, but also a lot in India, where it's not just whole steps and half steps. They have quarter tones, like notes that are in between the half steps. So they have a lot more notes available to them. If you've ever seen the instrument called the sitar, it's kind of like this humongous guitar-like instrument that has a buttload of strings, and you play it, and you have like the way that it's tuned, you have access, to all of these microtones, and you're encouraged to use all of those in the music. It's very unique. We're not really going to talk much about that with China and Japan, but a lot of the instruments, some of the music that you're going to hear in the videos use what's called the pentatonic scale. So this is a little bit different. Penta meaning 5. So this is a 5-note scale. If you go to a piano and you play, like you start with, so you look at the black notes on a piano, Okay. And you play just the black notes, like start with the group of three and the group of two. You play that group of five black keys together. That creates a pentatonic scale. And that scale is like that kind of scale is used in almost every single um, piece of music written in Eastern culture. So it's going to sound a little bit different. You have wider leaps and things like that. Um, Another thing that's different harmonically, it's not going to be major and minor. Okay. It's like a lot of this music is going to focus more on melody, and the melody is going to sound possibly a little more disjunct because of the leaps, because of the space between the notes. Because we're not doing a lot of stepwise things. Like if you go to the piano and you play all the white keys, like that's very stepwise. There are going to be a lot of skips and things like that in some of this music. Um, Also, the texture. So we're not really dealing with polyphonic, monophonic, homophonic. A lot of the texture is going to be sparse, especially in the Chinese and Japanese music. Indonesia, the texture is going to be different because you have this ensemble playing together, and that's going to be very complex. But a lot of the other stuff is going to be different. It's going to be like one instrument playing one line. It's going to be pretty monophonic. So that's going to be kind of the big difference um, in a lot of this stuff. So instruments, these are the Chinese instruments, or a few of them. So you have the Xing, the Xiao, the Guqing, the Pippa, and also the Erhu is going to be mentioned as well. Um, the Chinese instruments are normally classified according to like what material is used to make them. And you see that list there: metal, stone, silk, bamboo, gourd, clay, skin or membrane, and wood. So you're not really dealing a lot with like woodwind, brass, strings, keyboard. It's different. It's based on the material that's used to construct them. Um, First up is the guqing. It is a zither instrument. The guqing and the koto, which is the Japanese version, these are very popular instruments. They do differ in size. They can be really, really big. They can be kind of small, like they can kind of sit in your lap. I believe the one in this video, the Guqing, is a little bit smaller than the Koto that's featured in the Japanese video. But like I said, they like these instruments are very similar. They use similar number of strings, and it can vary. Like they can have a lot, typically between 20 and 25 strings, or they can have, between 10 and 15. It just kind of depends on the performer and what piece of music, what style of music that they are performing. Um, so this is definitely one of the oldest instruments. It is an ancient string instrument. It's been around for a very, very long time. Um, at one time, these strings were made of silk, but now usually steel or nylon, some kind of composite material, makes it a lot cheaper to construct. This performer, I don't think, is wearing finger picks or to pluck. Sometimes performers will grow out their nails, like guitarists will do this as well, instead of using a pick and pluck the strings that way. But a lot of people they'll have these like kind of metallic uh, finger picks, and they kind of like have this thing where they go over your fingers and will stay on as they are played. It's a really cool instrument. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard it before, even though you're not really familiar with it. It should sound familiar. Like I said, the Guqing and the Koto are very similar. But see if you guys can kind of tell a difference, maybe in the way that the music is written, the style of playing, how it sounds, the melodies, any of that kind of stuff. And we're not going to listen to the video. We're going to keep going. So you guys can do that on your own. Now the Shing is also known as the Chinese mouth organ. Not a great name, I know, but they call it the mouth organ. Number one, because you blow into it. Number two, you can sound multiple pitches at the same time, so it's kind of like a keyboard instrument, but technically a wind instrument. It does have a reed that's inside of it, so it's going to sound similar to like a bagpipe, or harmonica, accordion, that sort of thing. The top video is one that kind of explains, talks a little bit about the Sheng, shows you the reed and the different components. And the bottom video is pretty cool. I believe this is the one where they're playing the Super Mario theme. Just kind of shows you it's the oldest, it's one of the oldest instruments. It's over, well, almost 1,000 years old. Um, but it can still play, it can still be modernized, in a different way. But um, this one's interesting because it can be a solo instrument or it can be an accompanying instrument because it's very similar to a keyboard. It can play chords and harmony and stuff like that. So um enjoy those videos. I'm going to stop those. There we go. Okay. Now the xiao, um one of the first instances of the end blown flute. Generally they're made out of bamboo, same with the shakuhachi, the Japanese version. I've never seen the xiao before in first person, but the shakuhachi, there's a professor at Augusta University that plays the shakuhachi and even brought a master shakuhachi musician from Japan over here to Augusta for a semester. Really, really awesome. That, like, it's a very unique, just kind of like a haunting kind of sound. It is like harder, like more difficult to play than a normal flute. Like flute is probably one of my most difficult instruments to play. Like, I had a hard time playing it when I was younger. I can do it, but it's just not one of those things that I'm just like naturally talented at doing. Flute, it takes a lot of air. This one, these flutes, I feel like take even more air and control because the the tone hole, the hole that you blow into, like it's smaller, and it's just, you have to focus the air even more, to be able to produce the sound and get the quality that you want. Um, so I also mentioned, that there are different types of bamboo flutes in ancient China, in Japan, in other cultures, in Korea and Vietnam and things like that. This is just an example of one of them. This is the most, I guess, common one, the most typical one that you would see. In terms of playing, it's very similar to a recorder. You have anywhere from 5 to 7 tone holes on the front, and then a thumb hole on the back. You can cover the holes completely. You can half cover them to get tones, to get like half steps and stuff like that, sharp or flat notes. So it's a really interesting, it's a very unique kind of sound. I'll let you guys listen to the video, and you guys can see if you think the xiao and the shakuhachi sound similar. I mean, I think they do. In some instances, I think the shakuhachi is probably a little bit bigger, a little bit longer, in terms of size, but they are very, very similar. So this one, the erhu, is a very cool instrument. It is a traditional Chinese instrument that's still used today very frequently, even in pop culture. The last video in the China slides, you'll see a pop culture video, a popular tune, a popular song that uses an erhu in the video. So this one is different from our normal string instruments because it only has two strings. It also doesn't have like a sound box that we normally see. The violins, cellos, like the the instrument itself is hollow on the inside and it has old holes in the front so that the vibrations can go in, the sound can reverberate throughout the instrument and be made a little bit louder. This one doesn't. It also doesn't have a fingerboard, so the performer has a lot of freedom and things that they can do with the strings, and you'll kind of see that in this video. It does have a very, very tiny resonator down at the bottom. And typically this is covered in some kind of membrane, typically, usually snake skin. But you can use any other kind of composite material as well. The two strings are tuned a fifth apart. And the bow itself, so usually string bows, like it has this turn at the end of the bow that makes the hairs on the bow become taut. So you can rub those hairs across the string and it produces a sound. For the erhu, the performer actually has to kind of grip the hair of the bow and change it, and is able to control the tightness, the tautness of the hairs. Another thing, the bow, like they play kind of in between the two strings, so it's really unique. They can play like both strings at the same time. It's just really, really uncommon. You don't ever see this in like Western string instruments. So this is kind of another kind of unique thing with this particular instrument. And again, this can be a solo instrument or it can be used within a larger ensemble. So it is very, very versatile. Now the last one in the China group is the pipa. So the pipa is very similar to like a guitar, or really a lute, that would have been used in like ancient Greece and Italy, in early like Middle Ages European music. So a very early version of a guitar. So these modern pipas, they typically have four strings and they have lots of frets, and you can kind of see on the instrument itself that the frets, like they start out pretty large and they're a little bit further apart, and then as it goes down to the body of the pipa, these frets, they get smaller, that are narrower, and they also become closer together. The strings themselves, like with the zither instruments, made of silk, but typically now probably some kind of metal or composite nylon material. You use your fingers or fingernails to pluck the instrument, similar to how you would play a guitar. Don't normally use picks for these. The pipa is pretty cool. It does sound kind of like a guitar like instrument, but the performers will also use kind of a slapping motion on some of the strings. They will pull the strings side to side to create interesting sounds. So it's a really neat instrument. I'll let you guys listen to the video. Just kind of gives you an example of what guitar like, lute like instruments would sound like from China. Now, this one is a pretty cool video. This is a recent video by I don't Lei Zhang. How do you pronounce his name? It's called Veil. A very popular C-pop artist in China. Probably one of the most famous stars from China right now. Um, but so same thing with Japan. China's music scene, especially the popular music scene, mimics ours a good bit, especially with specific pop music. Japan has a very huge, I guess you could say rock, like alternative metal kind of scene there as well. Um, Japan's popular music scene is actually the second largest uh, music industry in the world behind ours. So they even do more than China. But like I said, I think I mentioned earlier, this song actually uses an erhu at the beginning, and that melody is sampled throughout the song. So this is a really cool blend of traditional and pop. So I hope you guys enjoy this one. All right, now to Japan. Going to kind of go through this quickly because it is going to be, the instruments are going to be pretty similar. So the main difference between China and Japan, the Japanese are a little bit stricter and have, I guess, more of a spiritual connection with performance. Um, so the rhythms, the music, it's not very rhythmically structured. Rhythms are ma based. So ma is loosely translated to space and time. Silence is equally important as the sound. Um, so this is supposed to mirror nature. It can also create kind of a meditative sort of state. So should be kind of similar to a lot of the sacred music, that you heard from the Middle Ages. So there is some connection there. And from the spiritual standpoint, this is more about self composure, like mastery of oneself, becoming maybe one with nature in terms of your performance. And you'll kind of see that, especially in the koto, the zither instrument video, because the performer is performing outside. The melody is sakura. It's based on like it's kind of based on, or the melody is always kind of connected with cherry blossom trees, which are really huge in Japan. So there's always this kind of nature aspect in a lot of the music. Um, so the music, the performance itself is usually very highly ritualized. Not only is the performer worried about the music, but they are worried about their composure, like their performance as well as a musician. Um, so they, they may not show a lot of emotion, or they may, like, because the last video with the taiko drums, there is like it's very structured, like they're all doing the same thing at the same time, but they're also yelling and making guttural sounds and stuff while they play. So you know they are allowed to express emotion, but it's always kind of controlled, which is very, I mean, and that's something that is very prevalent in Japanese culture as well. Like everything is very controlled, and it's always about mastering, like just being able to do something without flaw, and that translates over into the music as well. So you could think of music and the practice of music, playing an instrument, as a way for someone to uh, gain inner strength, to also help them master their own selves. So here are the instruments that we'll talk about: the koto, another zither instrument; the shakuhachi; the shamisen, which is a really cool instrument; and the teiko drums, which are pretty cool. All right, so the shakuhachi, probably the most famous in-blown flute. There are plenty of people that play these throughout the world. As you can see, they are very similar to the xiao and other in-blown bamboo flutes. Um, this shakuhachi is extremely old, dating back to the 600s. So it's been around for a very long time. Again, made out of bamboo, it can have 4 to 8 holes, usually 7 on the front, 1 on the back. The one on the back is the thumb hole. Sometimes people will do multiphonics on these instruments, and that's by playing a note on the instrument and humming while you're playing. I'm not sure if this video has an example of that, but it might. It's a really cool effect. So they will bend pitches sometimes with their fingers over the holes or with their embouchure, their mouth, by like dropping the jaw and things like that. So anyway, I'll let you guys listen to the video and see if you hear any differences in the sound or even how they are played. Same thing with the koto, so another zither. And you can kind of see from this picture, I think this one is, a little bit bigger than the guqing. So, and like I said, the sizes differ. Um, like the koto, the guqing, like they're both extremely similar. In one instance, the koto may have more strings, may be bigger. In another instance, the guqing might have more and be bigger, or vice versa. It differs depending on who's performing, the setting, all those kind of things. Sometimes they will use plectrums with the koto. They're known as sume. And typically they can be made out of ivory. They can be made out of any kind of substance. They'll be on the first 2 fingers. I think from this video, you will notice that this performer is using her left hand to kind of press down and create vibrato and manipulate the sounds as she's plucking and playing with her right hand. So you can do the same thing with the guqing. It's just, I think this video kind of does a little bit more with the pitch manipulations than the guqing version. And like I said, with the guqing pentatonic scale, like most of these instruments are based on the pentatonic scale. The koto first appeared in the 700s, so again, another extremely old instrument, way older than a lot of our Western instruments. So I'll let you guys listen to that and see what you think, similarities, differences between the koto and the guqing. The shamisen is really cool. You'll notice these plectrum things down here. So they will play with those on the strings. And sometimes they'll use them to kind of hit the strings and create different sounds. They're really neat, and these look really, really cool. I love the colors on these plectrums. The membranes on these, so it has like a guitar kind of box down at the bottom. It has the membranes. Traditionally, they were made from cat skin. Now, well, you never know, but pretty sure they're probably some kind of just composite material used for the plectrum. But you will definitely notice a very different kind of sound from the shamisen than other kind of guitar lute like instruments. It's kind of more of a metallic sound. And that could be a combination of what the strings are made of, the plectrums that they're using, the membrane that's over the sound box, a lot of different things. This particular video is a very lively kind of performance. You'll notice that they also make sounds and stuff while they're playing. I'm not sure if that's part of the music, but I mean, it probably is. A lot of this music that they're playing, especially if it's very, very old, it hasn't been notated, but it's probably been passed down from generation to generation. So a lot of this stuff is orally translated. There are some instances of music being written down throughout the centuries, but not a lot of it has been written down. So that is something else that's very different from our tradition, where almost all of our music is written down like on sheet music. uh Music of this from these cultures typically is not. So my favorite, the taiko drums, taiko. So these really, it's a barrel shaped drum, and it can be any barrel shaped drum, but typically they're they're going to look like the ones in this particular video. The ones at the top are a little bit bigger, in the middle slightly smaller, and then at the bottom row they're the smallest. And you'll notice on the bottom row in the video that they also have rope. Like the bottom ones, they have rope tying the membranes, the head of the drum in place. um either is typical. You'll notice on the top they have like kind of a ring. It's usually like a metal or wooden ring around the head of the drum that keeps the membrane in place. um I don't Sometimes if the drum heads are bound using rope, you can press down on the rope to manipulate the pitch. That's something that's very common in a lot of African cultures with those drums. We'll talk about a talking drum when we discuss West Africa, but I don't think the taiko drums are like that. I could be wrong, but I don't think they are. You'll also notice that for these, the sticks, like they're very thick sticks. Typically they don't have like a felt drum, like a head like we normally use on our bass drums and things like that. And you'll also notice that like the drumming is extremely aggressive. Everybody is in a particular stance. You could think like karate, taekwondo. Elements of that is going to be in music as well. So they all have a particular stance that they are doing. They are all kind of moving in particular ways when they play. It's very cool, energetic, but also very ritualistic in nature. All right. And like I mentioned, Japan has the second largest music market in the world, behind ours, of course. Um, and they have lots and lots of different kinds of music. If you've ever watched any kind of anime show, you'll know that they have a big kind of rock, alternative, grunge culture there. Because almost every single anime show out there has some kind of rock inspired theme song or outro song. Um, this is actually one of my favorite songs, Telecaster Stripes by Polka Dot Stingray. It's a really, really neat song, which I kind of gravitate towards alternative style rock music. And this one's it's a really neat song. I think you guys will enjoy it. But also in Japan, don't really get to talk about, they have this huge symphonic culture as well, like Western symphony. Like they have amazing symphony orchestras there. They have amazing composers in Japan, and especially composers that write music for video games. Think about the Final Fantasy series. I shared, I think I know, did I? I don't remember. I may not. I think it might have been the summer class, but they have amazing symphonic music, orchestral music that's written for so many of the video games that we all, or most of us, play. Um, and these composers are just, if not more, just as talented, if not more, than many of our Western composers. So there is, we're talking about the traditional music here, but yeah, Japan just has a huge musical culture. Same thing in China. Like there are lots of symphony orchestras there as well. They have kind of embraced the Western culture. For a while, they had like Americans. I've known several Americans and other Europeans that have gone to Japan and played in their symphony orchestras and lived there for a few years. So both cultures definitely embraced the West, a lot more so than we have embraced their cultures. um, but they do still keep their traditions very much alive, which they should, because it is deeply rooted in history, like so much history. So Indonesia, lots and lots of islands here. Big space. But in this, we're really only talking about two islands, specifically Java and Bali. Okay. Um, so in this basically revolves around the gamelan orchestra. There's so much that you can you could discuss, but this is something that's extremely unique, and very cool to learn about, which is why most of us choose to talk about it. And there's a lot to talk about and discuss, because there is so much written about the gamelan orchestra. So when Islam and the Muslims took over the island of Java in the 1400s, so the many of the people in Java fled to Bali. So a lot of this stuff kind of originated in Java, and then when people fled to Bali, you had a sharing of the mines, and the gamelan orchestra is prevalent in both cultures. There is a huge, not just music but dance and like theatrical culture there. The gamelan orchestra is typically used to accompany lots of different things, whether it be dance, puppet theater, any kind of dramatical setting. You'll normally have a gamelan orchestra used as accompaniment for that particular performance. So just like with us, where you have opera and ballet, these different mediums do cross. They use, music is not just music, it can be used in a lot of different settings as well. The gamelan orchestras are very large orchestras, and these are the main types of instruments. Gambang, which is kind of like a xylophone. Same thing with the saran, but it's metallic. The bonang, these are like kettle pots that you hit. So similar, but a different sound because it's like a hollow metallic structure. And then you have the gongs. Okay. They can be shaped, they can be like the kettle pots, they can be like the flat sheets of metal, like we're used to seeing with gongs. There are many different types. So these are the main types of instruments. Here I list some, I have the Kimpul and all of those and give you like a strict definition of them, but I also include some other important um, types of instruments there. Please don't ask me to pronounce any of these because yeah, I'll let you guys read them. And thankfully, you guys don't have to pronounce any of these either. So there you go. Now, I do have this video. This will take you through a lot of the different instruments and talk a little bit about them and tell you the differences. So that is pretty cool and a great resource. This one is a traditional gamelan orchestra performance. And you'll notice not only do they have the gamelan stuff in the background, but they also have some traditional drums as well. So it's pretty cool. And again, like the texture, it's very rich because you have a lot of stuff going on, but it will still sound kind of sparse to our ears because it's percussion. Like you're not having these melodies and chords and stuff stacked on top of each other. It's almost like letting kids go rampant in a kitchen banging on pots and stuff. Like it sounds like there's no structure, but it is very like highly structured. So, and then also just to add more to your plate, here's like a more modern rendition. So a group of students and enthusiasts from the United States sharing their own version of the gamelan orchestra. So there are over 200 of these groups that are active in the United States alone. That's a lot. So there is uh, a lot of support and enthusiasm for this particular tradition, which is really cool. All right, guys. So I hope you got something out of that. So that's pretty much it with the Asian cultures. So don't forget about the reflection paper that you need to do. It is very straightforward. It's like an in-class essay. Just what are some similarities? What are some differences? That's all you got to do. It doesn't have to be extremely formal. Just at least make it a page and you're good to go. Okay. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.